All right, when you think about divine law, what comes to mind? Probably ancient commands, right? Etched into stone tablets. But what if that was just the beginning? In this explainer, we're going to dig into a really radical idea that the whole point of law isn't just to control what you do, but to completely transform who you are. So, that leads us to this big question right off the bat. Are laws just a big list of rules, a cosmic rule book to keep us all in line? Or is it something way more profound? Like maybe it's a blueprint for a perfect character. Seriously, how you answer that changes everything about the way we look at morality. Okay, so to really unpack all of this, we've got to start at square one with the foundation. Because you'll see how we define a couple of key words, law and sin, basically sets the course for this entire journey. First up, law. And I want you to just for a second, forget the idea of law as some stuffy rule book. In the framework we're looking at, law is something so much bigger. Think of it as the direct expression of a divine, righteous character. It's the ultimate standard, right? The perfect measuring stick for what righteousness even is. Okay, so if that's the standard, this perfect character, then what's sin? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. It's just failing to meet that standard. The original Hebrew word for it, katao, literally means to miss the mark. It's like an archer shooting an arrow and missing the bullseye. So see, sin isn't just about breaking some random rule. It's about falling short of the real target, which is that perfect character. And, the Apostle Paul nails this idea perfectly. When he writes that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, he's making that exact same connection. He's saying that sinning is the failure to reflect that divine character. And the really crucial takeaway here? Yeah, we've all missed the mark. All right, now, I bet for most of us, when we picture the beginning of divine law, we think of Moses, right? Up on a mountain holding two big stone tablets. But what if that wasn't the beginning at all? What if the roots of this law go way, way deeper into history than that? It turns out the law wasn't just dropped on humanity all at once. It looks like it was revealed progressively, as people needed it. It starts super simple, just a single command given to Adam. Then, after the flood, Noah gets new instructions for a totally new world. But here's the real kicker. Centuries before Moses ever went up that mountain, a man named Abraham was apparently already living by a pretty complex system of divine laws. And we're not just guessing here. Here's the proof, straight from the text. Genesis states, plain as day, that Abraham followed God's commandments, statutes, and laws. Now get this is 400 years before Sinai. That is a massive clue that some kind of divine legal framework was already known and being followed long before it was ever carved in stone. So, if laws were already around before Moses, then what was the big deal about what happened at Sinai? Well, that brings us to what's called the Old Covenant. The best way to think of it is as a necessary, but ultimately limited, external framework. It was designed for a world that was really struggling with sin. And this Mosaic law, it served a really critical purpose. I mean, it was like a guardrail for humanity. It was there to restrain our worst impulses, to create a structure for justice, to protect the rights of victims, and to make sure that punishments actually fit the crime. It was designed to limit the crazy, excessive punishments people might dream up on their own. It was a good and holy system meant to bring some order and just limit the damage we were doing. But here's the thing. There is a fundamental flaw with any system that's purely external. It can control your behavior, sure, but it can't change your heart. And human nature? Well, it's absolutely brilliant at finding loopholes. You can force someone to follow a rule, but you can never, ever force them to actually love righteousness. And it's that very limitation that sets the stage for this massive pivot in the whole story. I mean, if an external system can't fix the internal problem, then what can? And the answer, we're told, is the New Covenant, which is this radical shift away from outside-in rules to an inside-out transformation. And wow, the difference between the two is just stark. You look at the Old Covenant, and it operated using external force, the fear of punishment. But the New Covenant? It works internally, through love and agreement. The old way was about restraining lawlessness. The new way is about changing our very nature. It's the difference between a law written on stone tablets and that same law being written directly on our hearts. The motivation just completely flips from trying to avoid a penalty to genuinely wanting to align with God's character. But, okay, this whole idea of being under grace instead of under law brings up a huge question. It's one the Apostle Paul totally saw coming a mile away. He asks, so what? Shall we sin because we're not under law but under grace? Basically, if we're not under the law anymore, does that just give us a free pass to do whatever we want? Well, the answer is all about what those two little phrases, under law and under grace, actually mean. See, being under law doesn't just mean that a law exists and you have to follow it. It's more specific. It's a legal status. It means you've broken the law and now you are officially guilty. You are liable for the penalty. You're in debt to the law. So then, being under grace means that while the law itself still stands as the perfect standard, you have been freed from its penalty. And why? Because someone else has stepped in and paid your debt. They've satisfied the law's demands for justice on your behalf. So get this, the law hasn't been thrown out, its penalty has been paid in full. I know this can all feel a bit abstract and theological, so let's try to ground it in a really simple modern analogy. It's just a helpful way to picture this big shift from being under law to being under grace. Okay, so imagine you're out driving and you're speeding. You get caught. That's the violation. The second that officer hands you a ticket, boom, you are now under the law. You owe a penalty, a fine. But then, let's say a really generous relative comes along and pays the entire fine for you. What happens then? The law is satisfied. You are released from the penalty. You are now under grace. But here's the most important part. Think about it. Would that generous relative be happy if you took that freedom and immediately went right back out and started speeding again? No way. Of course not. Their act of grace wasn't a license to keep breaking the law. It was an act of love meant to set you free, not to enable the very behavior that got you in trouble. And this brings us right back around, full circle, to the ultimate goal of all of this. This new covenant, it works by love, not fear, to change us from the inside out. We start to genuinely agree with God's character. Suddenly, the law isn't some external burden we have to carry. It actually starts becoming an expression of our own transformed character. We do what's right, not because we're afraid of getting in trouble, but because that's who we're becoming. And that's precisely why this warning from Jesus is so incredibly powerful. He makes it crystal clear that a genuine internal transformation has to show up on the outside. A life of lawlessness, as he puts it, is the polar opposite of having God's character written on your heart. So we're left with this one big ultimate question. What happens to us, to our communities, to the world, when our motivation to do good is no longer external? When it's not about the fear of stone tablets, but about an internal love for what's being written on our own hearts? Now that is a transformation that could change absolutely everything. Thanks for exploring it with us today.